Travel into the European Union is being severely restricted to contain the spread of the coronavirus. European Union leaders have agreed on a 30-day ban on travellers entering the bloc. The decision will affect most non-citizens and non-residents of the European Union, with some exceptions. It will be up to each member state to implement the new regulations. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said the EU would do what's necessary to protect the public's health and the economy.
All across Europe, movement is grinding to a halt. In Berlin, Chancellor Merkel announced that even travel into the EU will now cease.
Travel into Europe from countries that are not part of the European Union and are not Great Britain is prohibited with very few exceptions. This ban has to be implemented by the member states and will apply for 30 days.
Travel within the Union has also become increasingly difficult. Germany, in the centre of Europe, has been hemmed in by border closures. And even within countries, quarantines are keeping people at home. On Wednesday, Belgium will be the latest country to implement a complete lockdown.
Civilians are obliged to stay at home in order to avoid as much contact as possible outside their close family, except to go to work, except for essential journeys, to go to the doctor, to the grocery store, to the post office, to the bank, to the pharmacy, to get petrol, or to help people in need.
In Ireland, streets were empty as St. Patrick's Day celebrations were called off, and the Prime Minister delivered a sombre address to the nation.
Tonight, on our national holiday, I want to send a message around the world. We are in this together. To the people of China, Spain and Italy, who've suffered untold heartbreak and loss, we are with you. To everyone who's lost a loved one to this virus, we are with you. To all those living in the shadow of what is to come, we are with you.
Pubs and schools are closed and large gatherings forbidden. In Ireland and the rest of Europe, social distancing is the price to pay to slow the spread of the coronavirus.
And for more on Europe's response to this crisis, let's bring in our political correspondent, Hans Brandt. Hans, tell us who precisely will be affected by the 30-day travel ban?
Well, the European Union prefers not to call it a ban, but a temporary restriction. But in effect, it applies to all citizens of non-EU countries and of a number of countries that are very, very closely associated with the EU. That is Switzerland, Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein. So citizens from these countries are allowed into the EU. Citizens from other countries from outside the EU are not allowed in unless they have permanent residence here in the European Union or in one of those other countries. And there is also some level of access for members of families of people who live in the EU, who are citizens of the EU, and certain exceptions such as for medical personnel.
Now, so it's not a travel ban, but travel restrictions, you say, and Germany seems to be leading the case of those 30 days travel restrictions. Is that so? And if so, why?
Yes, I think you can say that. The point is that the European Union cannot, in fact, impose such a ban. It can propose it to its member states, and the member states themselves have to implement it. So Germany implemented this last night, as soon as it had been decided, simply by a declaration, by closing its borders, as it were. There are other countries within the European Union, such as the Czech Republic, for instance, who already have in place travel bans that are similar. The Czech Republic, in fact, will not allow anybody who is not a citizen of the Czech Republic into that country at the moment, including other EU citizens. So the implementation is still to be implemented by various countries, but it's going to be very quickly, I imagine.
All right. Not only people are travelling, goods also move across a border. And Angela Merkel had something to say about that. Let's listen in.
We pledge to coordinate the repatriation of European Union citizens stranded, in quotation marks, in other parts of the world. We also discussed the supply of medical products and equipment. At the request of many member states, the Commission has decided to undertake collective tenders to obtain certain medical goods. A very welcome move for all.
Well, Angela Merkel just mentioned issuing tenders for certain medical goods. Now, is Europe actually working together to ensure that the most vulnerable member states like Italy do have enough supplies?
I think we have to say that kind of cooperation has been really lacking in recent weeks. Initially, France imposed a ban on exporting certain goods from France. Germany also imposed a ban on exporting things like surgical masks from Germany. Both of those restrictions are now slightly being lifted, and exports under control of the European Union are to be allowed into other European Union countries. So one is trying to restart the internal exchange within the European Union. As I said earlier, there are several countries that have closed their borders within the European Union. Germany as well has instituted controls at certain borders, and this is restricting the exchange of goods, not only of goods such as medical supplies, but of goods of everyday life. There are backups at all border posts within the European Union, some of them for 20 or 40 hours. So trying to get that internal trade going again is part of the reason why the external borders are being closed at the moment.
So, I mean, Germany is right at the centre, at the heart of the European Union. How worried is Germany that goods, both medical and other goods, could dry up in this period?
Well, at the moment, the Germans are saying that supplies of daily life, food and medical supplies are not restricted at the moment. There's no problem with getting them. Shops, in fact, are being opened on Sundays, which is unusual in Germany, so that people can get their daily goods. But the fact of the matter is that there are large backups on certain borders, and that this is likely to affect the supply of goods, the flow of goods. At the same time, medical supplies obviously are particularly important, and exceptions are being made for that. The European Union is trying to get that particular flow of goods to become a lot more easy in the next few days.
All right, Hans Brandt there, DW's political correspondent. Hans, thank you so much for this. China has reported just one new case of the coronavirus that was transmitted domestically. Now, this is the second consecutive day where there was only one new infection in Wuhan, the original epicenter of the global outbreak, where the virus first emerged late last year. China has imposed stringent restrictions on travel and movement in a bid to prevent the virus from spreading. More new infections are now being imported from overseas, with 12 such new cases reported in the latest data. The total number of confirmed coronavirus infections in mainland China is almost 81,000. And for more, let's bring in Simina Mistreanu, a journalist in Beijing. Good to have you with us. So this is the second day in a row that China reports just one new domestically transmitted case of coronavirus. Do authorities there think that they have turned the corner in fighting the virus?
Hi. Yes, China is pretty confident at this point that it has passed the peak of the coronavirus outbreak. In fact, the government said just that last Thursday. And it said the National Health Commission said that the number of new infections is continuing to decline. And at this point, like you mentioned earlier, we had one locally transmitted infection reported in China today and one yesterday. And we are having more imported cases. And also last week, President Xi Jinping visited Wuhan for the first time since the start of the crisis, which is like a very clear sign that China considers itself on the road to victory in battling the virus.
And China seems to even now have the means to help others. China says it's ready to help Spain fight the virus, Spain, of course, being the second most affected country here in Europe. Tell us what China is offering.
China has so far offered to send Spain protective equipment. It's offered to open new commercial channel to send such equipment quickly to Spain. It's also offered to send medical supplies, and it said it's encouraging medical experts in China and professionals having exchanges with professionals, with medics in Spain. And it's also considering sending doctors from China to Spain, which would be like a new development.
OK, well, at the same time, relations between China and the US seem to, or could possibly be cooling again. The Chinese government certainly reacted strongly to US President Donald Trump, calling coronavirus a, quote, Chinese virus. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, China has been vocal about not wanting the coronavirus labeled as a Chinese virus or a Wuhan virus, which has also been a term used by US politicians. And on the one hand, their official discourse coming from the foreign ministry is pretty balanced. They're saying, like, we're supposed to help each other as countries fighting together against this outbreak. On the other hand, they do have certain more rogue voices, such as a foreign ministry spokesman who tweeted last week that it is actually possible that the virus was brought to Wuhan by the US Army, which is kind of a conspiracy theory that hasn't been proved. And then we also have the Chinese state media who are kind of peddling these conspiracy theories. So like it often happens in China, you have two trains of discourse that come from the government that are like kind of a bad cop, good cop situation.
All right, so a bit of a blame game going on there on both sides. Ximena Mistriano, journalist in Beijing, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, turning back to Europe, where Spain, as we just mentioned, is one of the countries currently hardest hit by the virus, with nearly 12,000 confirmed cases and over 500 deaths. To slow the spread of the infection, the country has been in a nationwide lockdown since last week. But the tight restrictions on travel and commerce have hit the country's vital tourism industry hard. DW's Jan-Philipp Scholz reports from Seville.
The historic centre of Seville is like a ghost town. The lockdown and the government-ordered closure of all restaurants and bars is having the desired effect. Hardly anybody is out on the streets, and tourists are nowhere to be found.
Closed due to reasons of public health, those signs are visible everywhere in Sevilla at the moment. Tourism is Spain's third most important economic sector, and Sevilla is one of the most popular destinations. Nobody even dares to think about the long-term consequences for the economy at the moment, but the first devastating effects are already visible for small enterprises.
This is despite promises from Madrid to provide emergency credit for the tourism industry and giving small businesses a break from paying taxes for the coming months. The measures are part of a massive relief package announced by the Spanish government. But the measures are inadequate, says Manuela Stuhl. For more than 10 years, she's run a small agency renting holiday apartments. In the last few days, all her clients have cancelled.
Manuela, can you tell me about the consequences for your business?
Well, we are in shock right now. We are facing €0 income. Everything got cancelled. We're a team of 8 people. And we're just getting out of the low season, so normally what would be now the high season is completely damaged, 0 income.
And what would help you right now?
Actually, only money, quick and unbureaucratically, to help that our companies can survive. And once this crisis is over, we can quickly get into raise the employment, and I think it would be less damage for everybody, a quick help from the government now, than facing the whole population being unemployed.
Manuela is not just thinking about her own situation. Her employees and their families will suffer financially with the lockdown expected to last longer than the original 15-day period.
And as the virus continues to spread across Europe, there are growing fears of an outbreak at Greece's overcrowded migrant camps. Last week, authorities confirmed the first case of coronavirus on the island of Lesbos, prompting fears it could spread to the island's notorious Moria camp. Refugees there are already living in squalid conditions with little medical care. Now they're more at risk than ever before.
The Moria camp was originally planned for 3,000 people, but now it's housing some 20,000 asylum seekers. They live in homemade tents outside the official camp in what's been nicknamed the jungle. More than 1,000 people share a single water outlet, which frequently malfunctions.
When we arrive here, we see here's not water. Now we must go without water again to home. It's our daily life.
Sadar, an Afghan doctor, lives with his wife and 4 children in a small tent. They fled the war in their country and now rely on aid. This means waiting in long, crowded lines for hours to get food. Avoiding close contact is almost impossible in Moria. Aid organisations say the camp is an ideal breeding ground for the coronavirus.
We are extremely concerned about these very cramped conditions. There's no soap. It's impossible for people to take even the most basic hygiene precautions. And that's what's worrying, because it means they cannot do anything to stop the spread of the virus if it were to arrive in the camp.
The aid organisation Doctors Without Borders runs a hospital here on the outskirts of the camp. There are hardly any coronavirus testing kits and there's a shortage of doctors. Many patients already have respiratory illnesses and weakened immunity, which makes it much easier to contract the virus.
We have a lot of people who are very vulnerable anyway. We have a lot of very sick children, also suffering from chronic diseases, epilepsy, diabetes, very severe mental health issues. And obviously we have adults too who've been traumatized. So it's difficult to predict, but in principle all these people are extremely vulnerable to yet another health threat.
The Greek government says it's prepared for this scenario, that there is a corona crisis plan. But the camp's aid organisation says they've yet to see it. That's why they're taking matters into their own hands. At Team Humanity, a small NGO, refugees sew surgical masks. They can make up to 300 a day.
The volunteers are amazing. These women are sitting there from 7 o'clock in the morning until 9, 10 in the evening and just want to do it. We tell them take a break. They don't want to take a break. They just want to work. They want to help. They know how dangerous this is. Everybody knows how dangerous this is.
Because of this threat, there's really only one solution, which is that the European Union must now do everything possible to evacuate these people as quickly as possible. Lesbos Moria camp is not a place where you can handle a potential corona threat, and the action needs to come now.
But as European countries continue to seal off their borders, many refugees are afraid they'll be forgotten in the coronavirus crisis.
We're staying in the US. The Trump administration is proposing an $850 billion stimulus package that would, among other measures, send a $1,000 check to every American. The package would also include $50 billion for the American airline industry, a cut in payroll taxes and further loans on guarantees for small businesses. The plans come as governments around the world scramble to send direct aid to citizens affected by the pandemic. It would still need to be passed by Congress. Asian markets are mixed today. Taiwan is in the red, while Japanese and Chinese stocks are trading in positive territory. Investors are still reeling from the fallout of the coronavirus outbreak. News that the US government is readying a huge stimulus package of $1 trillion to help individuals and business get some relief from effects of the COVID-19 pandemic hasn't calmed market nerves. Experts are warning that the virus fallout could trigger a global recession. Over to our financial correspondent in Taipei, Tsung-Han So. The economic fallout from the coronavirus can be felt best in China right now, and that's going to linger for a while, won't it?
Yeah, we can look at China's unemployment rate. The unemployment rate has jumped to 6.2% for January and February. It's the highest on record. It combines January and February to smooth out the impact of Chinese New Year holidays. But this official number does not tell the full story because it does not include most of the 291 migrant workers in China. So the actual number is much higher. And for Chinese top officials, stable employment has always been a top priority to ensure social stability. So China has rolled out tax cuts and emergency funds to help hard-hit small business, which employs the majority of China's workforce.
All right, so China has really brought out the bazooka, but the economic fallout can be felt nevertheless. Song Han So in Taipei, thank you so much. This is DW News, and these are our top stories. EU leaders have voted to seal off the bloc from nearly all international travel for at least 30 days in a bid to slow the spread of coronavirus. German Chancellor Angela Merkel announced the restrictions after a series of video conferences with other European leaders. The Trump administration is proposing an $850 billion stimulus package to soften the economic damage from the coronavirus. Among other things, the bill would send a $1,000 check to every American and provide further assistance for small business. Former Vice President Joe Biden has swept Tuesday's Democratic presidential primaries in the U.S. The voting went ahead in Arizona, Florida and Illinois, despite fears about the spreading coronavirus. The state of Ohio postponed its scheduled primary due to the pandemic. European football's governing body UEFA has confirmed the postponement of the Euro 2020 tournament until next year. It hopes the move will allow domestic leagues to complete their seasons and minimize the pandemic's financial impact on football clubs.